Man, isn't this great? It's portrait video recording, and I know you guys love it. I know it. It's your favorite thing. You say, don't do that, but we both know that you look forward to it. Let's be honest. After all, I can be pretty funny sometimes, especially with a little sauce, if you know what I'm saying. Yeah. Hey, sometimes, and this is the key for me, and what you need to understand about The Rush, is that I am unscripted. I know that seems likely, but I don't really hem and haw a lot, right? It seems like, okay, I'm well spoken. I don't script any of this stuff. I don't even always have something to say when I first come on. But I do try to wrangle a point out of all the words that I'm tossing at you and package it up such that somebody can understand it. And I find that it's interesting how easy it seems to be for the globe earthers to understand the things that I've said. And it's not because they're biased and just want to believe it and they back me up because I'm perpetuating the globe lie. It's really a matter of this. Physics makes sense when explained correctly and when envisioned properly. But it isn't even a stretch to understand it because it just is, right? So you just go, okay, water's wet. How does water really stick to you? What is wet exactly? What does that mean, right? It's hard to explain that because you know what it is intuitively because your life, anecdotally especially, because in your life you hopefully take showers and you hopefully wash your hands or drink water, and it's easy to understand the concept of being wet by being splashed by water. But what does it really mean, right? So what's actually going on that makes you wet? The bonding of the water molecules with surface tension and possibly gravity to your flesh, and then of course the vaporization of it as it dries, right? I mean, how do you explain all that stuff? You just say wet and somebody gets it. But when it comes to things like magnetic spectrum, the electromagnetic spectrum, what does that mean? Like that stuff, that is advanced kind of stuff, and it's things that people have tried to understand through just looking at the world and trying to figure out, based on what we know here, what's happening here, based on the properties of gravity and what we expect light to do, what do we have going on here. And it's a lot of thought that goes into all of the scientific stuff that we do today. But that's not how it always was, right? So Galileo's time, they barely began to look through telescopes into the sky at the objects floating in space. They didn't even have a real good understanding. They did not have a thorough understanding of the heavenly bodies that they were seeing. They understood a few things, such as the positions of certain stars was always the same. They also understood that over time they changed slightly, but they could still use them as reliable navigational tools. We understood that sort of thing, so we had a pretty good understanding, and the knowledge that they had then was advanced. But now, we're way beyond all of the basic crap because of so much scientific experimentation and peer review and documentation that by the time we're talking about the flat earth in 2019, it boggles my mind. I mean, here it is almost 2020. 2020 years after the current Anno Domini, in the year of our Lord, right? Or what is the new terminology for it? There's a new, instead of in the year of our Lord, they're now calling it something else, and it's on the tip of my tongue. I can't, it'll probably come into me in a few minutes. But 500 years before that, so not only the last 2,000 years, but 500 years before that, we had a better understanding of the earth and the universe than any flat earther of 2020. The Common Era, that's what it's called. So in the Common Era, we know for 2,000 years we've been studying more advanced things because we have the basics. It's kind of like saying, well, I learned how to drive last year and got my driver's license, and then 5 years later now I'm racing cars. Not only do I have the basics down, but now I'm actually studying things like aerodynamics and how do I go into a turn and what's going to be expected of me when I do that, and what is my car going to do based on the weight, based on all this other, the tire density. You take a basic thing and you expand upon it. We don't start off with a lie. But here's the problem. Here's the problem that flat earthers are going to have to face at some point. It doesn't make any sense to start attacking science the way that you do. Because you say it's a lie, the government control. If so, then it's not working because you are not being controlled by them. So if we factor that in, that means that governmental control is not 100% effective, just like condoms. Ergo, some of you flat earthers were probably the result of failed condoms. No, that's not what I meant. What I meant was, what I was trying to say is that since governmental controls don't obviously work on the masses, they do tend to fail to some degree. Like most anything, really, nothing's 100%, right? So with that in mind, there's always been this, subset of humans that has more knowledge. The problem with that ideology is that you don't present any of it. And I don't know, I guess it's kind of, it's an asshole move. I mean, it's kind of like saying, hey, you're an idiot, figure it out on your own. Oh, I know everything already that I need to know, but I'm not going to tell you because I want you to figure it out on your own. And that to me is asinine. Like, it's okay, I get it, kinda. There are plenty of things that I like to figure out on my own. There's not many computer applications that I can't sit in front of for any length of time and figure out, at least to what I needed to do. So I understand a little bit about the whole do your own research and train yourself, teach yourself. But here's the problem with that. That is not how society has moved forward throughout the centuries. A true viable society shares information such that everybody can gain from it and become better as a human, because better human individuals create better societies. And that's just a reality. It's an ideology, but it makes the sense, and here's your validation for that. A good citizen follows the rules and doesn't steal, kill, rape, murder. They don't do all that stuff. But a shitty citizen does some of that stuff, or a variety of those things. So if everybody were trying to be a better citizen, the society would be better, because we would be better without murder and rape and stealing and drugs and yada 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 yada. So better citizens make better societies. Therefore, better people make better living. And if you're not going to share this information that you have, then you're holding on to something, and that's pretty sadistic. And that really is a sign of a demented mind. You're so adamant that you know something, but you're not going to share it because fuck everybody, right? Incidentally, somehow you're on the same page as another 7% of the population, or whatever it is, about the earth being flat, but not a single one of you can seem to agree on what that means. Meanwhile, on the other side of that particular spherical shaped object are a bunch of people who, if we don't understand something, we can go look it up. But here's what I'm saying. All of us, Conspiracy Cats, Simon Dan, Greater Sapien, Fight the Flat Earth, Team Skeptic, Mr. Sensible, Sir Sick, all these crusaders against you bastards can go look up the same text and come back with the same explanation, as could I, along with them. Because even though I'm not a physicist, I understand the English language, and I know how to reconcile words I don't know, and to gain an understanding of the physics behind it. And we would come back and all tell you individually, apart from one another, the very same story, maybe differently worded, but it would amount to, we all understand how gravity works, we all understand the mass attracting mass equation, we get it, we can explain it to you separately, and it will be the same explanation. So you have to ask yourself, how does a person get that consistent with absolutely perfect predictable results? So in other words, whatever we predict using these things that we know about science will come true because we know about that stuff. How can we do that go behind your back and learn something, come back and explain it to you the same way each, if it weren't true, right? So if we have a book of lies that we can refer to, and each of us interprets it differently to a point, but can come back and explain it in a different way, but it says the same thing, the book of lies should work on you too if it's an actual lie that the government is using to control people. Because why would the government choose to control most of the people and let a few stragglers go? It's not their style. But it doesn't matter, because you don't have any knowledge to pass along. You have a lot of questions, and your questions are always little chisels trying to get at the core of the truth and try to whittle away the actual body of science that's been documented, peer-reviewed, and presented to you that you can all go find that none of you will want to read because it's too fucking boring, because you all want drama. That's why you're in this game. It's a drama grab. You're just out for attention. You want to see how much drama you can create and how much popularity you can derive from said drama. And at the end of the day, when it comes time to actually present some sort of form of knowledgeable experimentation or model or explanation or demonstration, as has been shown in recent videos of mine where people have stepped up to talk to me and actually listen and talk, can still not create a demonstration on how gas pressure works inside of a gas environment and still create a gradient. They can't create this demonstration. Nobody can in your scientific whatever community. So I gotta ask you, what the fuck makes you believe the earth is flat? Is it the lie that you believe the government is telling everybody? Is it the text that you read in full with an actual open mind to try to understand it and follow-up text to make sure that you do? What is it about the globe earth that you just can't wrap your mind around? Is it the fact that there's this force that makes everything go down, or it's not a force but everything still goes down? Because how do you explain that on a flat earth? If how does that work on a flat earth? You don't even know how that works on a flat earth. You can't come up with some mechanism. But how would a globe sitting in space pull everything down relative to the top of that ball, and not toward the center of that mass, but like a basketball sitting on a basketball court, pouring water over it? What is it that would cause all that water to flow down around the basketball and onto the floor beneath it? It still points that way. It still always goes that way. So what is that exactly? I mean, these are questions that you can honestly say are legitimate questions, because there is no explanation for the directional velocity of things flowing down to describe gravity on a flat plane. I mean, we could still use it to describe gravity on a flat plane, because incidentally, everything would still flow toward the center of the earth, which on a flat plane would be down. But then on a flat earth, you would also have to worry about where most of the mass is. And if it's a nice square flatness underneath, then that would explain why everything would flow down. But everything seems to flow toward center mass. So you'd have to explain why some of the stuff doesn't flow toward the center. You'd have to explain why the sun doesn't seem to move faster on the outer rings. You see what I'm saying? You have no explanations. None of you have any explanations. And I'm worried you don't understand what an explanation is, so I'm going to explain that so that you can fully be in the know of what it means to explain something. Okay? And I will use something that I'm very knowledgeable about to do this. Here's how you explain the creation of a chord. So, and then ergo chord. I'm going to explain how chord and chord progressions work. This is an explanation, nothing more. And it might be boring to you, but listen, because this is how you explain something. There are 12 semitones in a scale, a musical scale. You start with your root, whatever that happens to be, and you move up by 1/2 step from the root 11 times to get a total of 12 semitones. If we were to use the C as our root note, then semitones would be C, C sharp, D, D sharp, E, F, F sharp, G, G sharp, A sharp, B, C. Now, you'll notice that twice in there, I moved from one letter to the next without any sharp in there. That was between C and B and F, E, and F. Now, the way that the chord, that particular thing works is it creates steps. And everything goes by steps in music. Well, it often does. And a step is always a full step, which means in the semitones that I just mentioned, each of those is a half step. So if you combine two of those, you'll get a whole step. And this is how that works. A whole step from C to D would be C, D. It would go from C, skip over C sharp, the half step up, and land on D. That is one step. So if I were to play the E, that would be two steps above C. If I played the F, the E and the F don't have a half step between them, so that's actually a half step. So if I were to say go up 2.5 steps from C, you would be on F. And it's important to note that when you're playing a scale actually goes whole step, half step, whole step, half step. And that creates 8 notes in a scale. So while there are 12 semitones within a scale, only 8 of those notes create what you would call the scale. And that's the major scale. There's actually tons of scales you can go by, but I'm referring to a major scale. Actually, they're all the same. But the major scale is whole step, half step, whole step, half step. So if you're on a piano and you're looking at the keys, you'll notice 2 black keys grouped together and 3 black keys grouped together. And every so often there are 2 white keys with no black key between them. So if you think about a C, it's always the one following to the left, rather, of the 2 black keys that are together. And then there's the first white keys that are together that are E and F. And then you see the 3 black keys together. And then 2 more keys, white keys pressed together, that's B to C. So if you take a C scale and you go C, D, E, that's 2 whole steps, and you go half step. E to F is a natural half step, and then you do 3 more whole steps. So F, G, A, B, those are all whole steps, and then the last one is another half step. You get back to C. So in a C scale, C major scale, there are no sharps or flats. So if you're looking at a piece of music and you see those little sharps and flats there, it's actually referring to the key, because a C scale would have none of those. So if you don't see any sharps or flats at the beginning of a piece of music, that means that it is in the key of C major, or C. So there's that, okay? So that's how you figure out the scale. To create a chord within that scale, you would use any one of those 8 notes that fall within that scale to create a chord, and it had to be 3 total. And any chord played on a guitar or any instrument with multiple strings, I'm not counting a piano, but it'll make sense when I say this in a second if you think in terms of the piano. Any chord that you play is a simultaneous expression of 3 different notes. And those notes are in the position of the scale that I just told you, 1, 3, and 5. So the first position is 1, second position would be 2, so the third position is 3, 4, 5, and so on. So in a C scale, that's 1, so the third position would be a whole step, so E, and then another whole step, so C, E, and G make a C chord. So that's how you can figure out how to make a C chord. Now, if you play that on a guitar, there's 6 strings. You're going to press 3 of them down to create that C chord, but the other 3 notes that you aren't pressing down will also be C, G, and E. So there's only 3 chords actually played, no matter how many strings are being plucked at that time. That's what makes a major chord. C, E, and G, C, E major, and G. Or E, not E major, but C, E, and G. Those are the C chord. That's how you figure out a chord. 1, 3, 5. First you figure out the first position, then you figure out the steps in that particular scale. So you go whole step, half step, whole step, half step. And then a chord is the root plus whole step, and then another 2 whole steps, and that's your chord. So you can do that on a piano, you can do that on a guitar, it's easier on a piano. But if you're trying to figure out what the key of an instrument or a key of a piece of music is in, you look at how many sharps and flats are on there, you find the key that has that many sharps in it from that 12 semitones, and then you go from there, creating your chords. And that's how you would start with a chord progression. Now, it would be a much more powerful demonstration if I actually showed you on a guitar how that works, but the bottom line is that was an explanation of how we derive a chord out of 12 notes. If you could do something like that with the flat earth, you might actually have some traction. I mean, you wouldn't get far because we know that you're not going to have an actual reality matching definition or explanation. But the problem that I have with you guys is that you don't even get that far. So I'm hoping that at some point you'll have something to say that sounds like an explanation as to why the earth is flat instead of a bunch of questions as to why you think that science is stupid. I got to go to school. You have a good night.